In the United States, merely crossing an invisible state boundary can completely rewrite the entire legal definition of murder. In March 2015, a 26-year-old woman named Michelle Wilkins, who was 8 months pregnant, was brutally attacked in Longmont, Colorado. Her assailant beat and stabbed her and removed her fetus with a kitchen knife. Wilkins survived. The fetus did not. The assailant, Dynell Lane, faced more than a century in prison for attempted murder and unlawful termination of the pregnancy. But under Colorado law, she could not be charged with murder for the death of the fetus. The barrier was a centuries-old legal standard known as the born alive rule. This common law doctrine requires a child to be born breathing to be legally recognized as a victim of homicide. Under a strict common law interpretation, a fetus simply cannot be a distinct victim of a lethal criminal act, leaving a perceived gap in the justice system when violent attacks destroy a pregnancy. But look at what happens when we shift jurisdictions. In states like Indiana and Georgia, women like Purvi Patel, Bebe Schwei, and Kenlissia Jones faced a drastically different legal reality. These women utilized medication or ingested other substances to intentionally self-abort their pregnancies outside of a formal clinical setting. Unlike the third-party attacker in Colorado, these women were arrested by local authorities. They were charged with severe crimes, including malice murder and feticide, for the outcomes of their own pregnancies. The severity of these charges is absolute. Purvi Patel, for example, was convicted under Indiana's feticide statute and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Due entirely to geography, a woman can be imprisoned for terminating her own pregnancy, while a violent attacker in another state escapes a homicide charge entirely for destroying someone else's. Feticide in the U.S. is not dictated by a single federal standard of constitutional personhood. Instead, it is governed by a highly fragmented matrix of state statutes. 36 states and the federal government have actively bypassed the old born alive rule by enacting specific feticide laws. These statutes explicitly recognize a prenatal human as a distinct, individual victim of traditional criminal homicide. But the coverage of these laws varies wildly. 29 states apply these homicide protections from the very earliest stages of development, often starting at implantation. A minority of states take a different approach, requiring specific developmental milestones, such as viability or quickening, before feticide charges can even apply. Geography and gestational stage, rather than any universal biological or constitutional definition, strictly dictate whether the destruction of a fetus constitutes a murder. The single most critical variable determining a pregnant woman's criminal liability under these laws is the presence of a statutory maternal exemption. This chart shows the breakdown of U.S. feticide laws. About 2/3, 25 states, provide explicit immunity, shielding women from prosecution for ending their own pregnancies. However, 23%, 8 states, have feticide laws with no explicit exemption for the pregnant woman. The immediate legal consequence of this missing text is that the plain language of the state's criminal homicide statutes technically encompasses the pregnant woman's own actions. This lack of an explicit exemption is not a theoretical loophole. It is the exact statutory mechanism that local prosecutors utilize to charge women like Patel and Schwei. When third-party assailants are convicted of feticide, they frequently raise robust constitutional challenges in appellate courts. Their primary defense relies on the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, a constitutional mandate requiring states to treat individuals in similar situations equally. The assailants argued they are being unconstitutionally punished for destroying a fetus, an act a pregnant woman can legally elect to do. They claim that they, and pregnant women seeking abortions, are similarly situated under the law. Appellate courts, such as in the case of State v. Merrill, universally reject this argument. They rule that the two parties are fundamentally dissimilar. A woman's right to an abortion is rooted in her constitutionally protected privacy and bodily autonomy. Assailants do not possess a unilateral right to destroy someone else's pregnancy. Consent is the definitive legal wedge. Equal protection does not shield an assailant because the state views unconsented violence against a pregnancy as an entirely different class of act than a consensual medical procedure. Assailants also raise a second major constitutional defense, a substantive due process argument relying on the legal framework of Roe v. Wade. They claim a state cannot criminalize the killing of a non-viable fetus because the Supreme Court previously determined a fetus is not a constitutional person. The judicial counterargument is straightforward. While Roe limits state interference with the woman's choice, it does not bar the state from legally protecting potential life from an outside attacker. To secure these convictions, prosecutors rely on the vital criminal law doctrine of transferred intent. Under this doctrine, a defendant's intent to kill or harm the mother legally transfers to the fetus. This satisfies the strict criminal intent requirement for murder, even if the attacker didn't know the woman was pregnant. Courts have decisively ruled feticide statutes constitutional because they protect both the state's interest in potential life and the woman's procreative choice, operating entirely independently of abortion jurisprudence. Returning to our initial paradox, the uncharged Colorado assailant versus the imprisoned Indiana mother. In Colorado, an assault in a state without a feticide statute meant the born alive rule applied, resulting in no homicide charge. In Indiana, a self-termination in a state with a feticide statute, but no maternal exemption, allowed prosecution. These seemingly chaotic and contradictory real-world outcomes are not legal errors. They are the precise, mechanical results of state-specific statutory language overriding the common law. This reveals the dual, conflicting nature of feticide statutes in modern American law. These laws were primarily designed and enacted to deter violence against pregnant women and hold third-party assailants accountable. But that legal stability for victims stands in stark contrast to the highly precarious legal position of pregnant women residing in the 23% of states lacking explicit exemptions. In these specific jurisdictions, broadly worded feticide laws provide local prosecutors with the statutory authority to investigate and charge women experiencing miscarriages or seeking self-managed abortions. Without explicit uniform maternal exemptions, the very statutes enacted to protect a woman's pregnancy can be inverted by the state to prosecute the woman herself.